Hi, nice to see you again. So today I'm going to try to explain to you why it was inevitable that this was going to turn into an attempt at rendering everybody on Earth infertile or killing them, as an option. What the source of all this is, because everybody talks about money, the financial system, the economy, as if it's the end-all be-all, like it's the thing that matters the most. And of course, in this paradigm, in this this fucking crazy world that we're all born into, it's all about the money, it's all about monetizing, it's all about evaluating things, valuing things, owning things, selling things. That's what everybody's life is about, money. But I don't think people understand how hopeless and how useless money is the way it's been rolled out in the current paradigm, and I thought I would explain it to you. The way this works, if you just look at the United States, because it's the biggest country in the world, when they produce an American dollar, it's paid for by the government of the United States that's supposed to represent the people, but it's really just a company. All countries are companies. But even if you look at it as a nation, the nation and its people pay for the production of the dollar. The central bank, that is not part of the country, they're a private institution that has private shareholders that own it, that's not part of the United States. One of their ancestors 200 or 300 years ago somehow got this clever thought that possessing the idea that tacking interest that's due and payable to become the creditor of all of the countries at these central banks, so that they don't have to do all the thinking, they don't have to sweat the details. These experts from afar will do it. They're contracted out to do it. I think it started with the royal families because they're too dumb to look after their affairs, and they ended up getting owned by these people. And I'll explain to you how they ended up getting owned by these secretive banking families, thanks to their clever ancestor, and how all of the countries in the world are hopelessly in debt and it's impossible for them to get out. What happens is that this dollar that's produced, they tack on a couple of % interest to every dollar that's produced, and they charge interest on it forever. But each of those dollars and the interest that's collected, the money for the interest is never created. And what that means at 2% is that with 2% annual compounding interest in 35 years, they own the dollar that was produced. You can do the calculation. I'll leave a calculator for you to mess around with some numbers. But that's how it works. Another dollar is never produced to pay for the interest. They own that dollar if it stays in circulation for 35 years. Now that's based on 2%, maybe it's slightly lower, maybe it's slightly higher. These rates, they change all the time. But that would be on the low end. Most countries pay a higher rate of interest. And the higher the rate of interest, the faster the dollar comes back to the people that have the right to charge interest on it just because they thought of it first. That's how it works in the world. So a country that runs into difficulties, that gets forced into using a central bank, if they're a high-risk country, which all of them are, depending on their ability to fight back, which is almost nobody has the ability to fight back because they'll pimp out certain countries to force people into an arrangement with one of their central banks. But if it's at 6% or 7% or 8%, all it changes is the amount of time it takes for that unit of value to yo-yo back into their hand, because a yo-yo for younger people was just a rounded piece of wood with a spindle in the middle with a string wrapped around it. One end went onto your finger, and you throw this thing down, it spins, it collects up the string and comes right back into your hand. And every time they put out a dollar that the central bank doesn't pay for, the countries do, if it's 2%, 35 years later that dollar comes back, and no interest money is ever issued, so they become the owners of it. And in the case of the United States, it's been 109 years since the central bank started in 1913, I think it was. And if you go back 35 years, every dollar that was ever produced in United States history, up to 1987, which was 35 years ago, is back in the banks of these families, these secretive families whose ancestor thought of this clever idea. All of it, every cent. So when it's a challenged country that has to accept a higher interest rate, they get their percentage at a higher rate, and the country, again, the people, they pay for its production, but the central bank gets that back. The higher the interest rate, the faster it yo-yos back into their hot little hands, and the money is no longer in circulation or available for the people to use it. But since it's still in existence in the creditor's bank account, which is the globalists who own it, these secretive money families, it's still in existence. So the interest is still charged, compounding interest is still charged on that dollar, peso, yen, pound, euro, whatever it happens to be. That's how it works, folks. And all this fancy shit that they come up with, these measures to fight inflation, or the quantitative easing or whatever, all it does is change the interest rate. Reduce the value of the dollar, the peso, the pound, whatever it happens to be. They can jack with the values all day long. They increase the interest rates like they're going to do now that inflation's gone out of control. Now the cost of living has skyrocketed because of all the implausible excuses they have for raising the fuel prices and thereby all the value of the goods and everything else. The governments have to borrow more and more to pay back what they owe to their creditors, their external creditors. I'll put a graph, a table of external debt of the United States. In 2017, it was just over 20 trillion. Now, in 2022, in 6 short years, at the end of September, it has exploded up to 30 trillion. Just coincidentally, a 33% increase, by the way, in 6 years. So that's why they forced all this forward. They think that all those countries that owe all of that money that can never be paid back because the interest money is never printed, and to pay back any of the principal, they have to borrow money that 35 years from now is going to become the property of the people that they owe it to. It's a snake eating its tail. We're the snake eating its tail. We, the people of the earth, because it's happening in every country. In most countries, it's happening at a higher interest rate. So the money comes back into their hands much more quickly. But really, the position that we're in is the countries owe these people more money than can ever be paid back because the system will not allow it. The way I've explained it to you is the way it is. So they can never be paid back because they produce the money that's used to pay them back, thereby making it worse, right? Yeah, that's the way it is. But they think that they owe everything in every country that owes them money. They've inventoried everything you own, and they think it's theirs because your country borrowed it. You may have been born into debt that you could never repay if you spent your entire life slaving for these people for free and never sleeping and never eating and never having a life. No, if everybody did that for 10,000 years, it still wouldn't be paid down, not one penny of it, because compounding interest is so incredibly large. I doubt a supercomputer could tackle it. And that's the way it is. That's what they wanted. They wanted to get enough on this compounding interest to cover the value, their subjective evaluation of the earth and everything in it, all the birds, the bees, the flowers, the trees, and the animals, including us, and say, yeah, we own it all. In their minds, they do. They believe it. They really believe it. They think everything is theirs. And that's why it's depopulation. That's why it's murder. That's why it's sterilization. That's why they wounded so many people. Because they're trying to tamp down human aspirations. Remember Sadhguru talking about that in the last video? You cannot you cannot change human aspirations. Well, yeah, you can. You can. If they can't procreate, if they have nothing to live for, You know, the ones that you allow to live. The ones that you don't allow to live would be the ones that that actually tell other people what they're doing. You know, pull the sword out of the stone and actually have the guts to say something about it. Those people, they like to go around and whack them as quickly as possible. Anybody that hip to the fact that this is just an imaginary number that exists in their minds, it never should have existed in the first place. They never earned it, and they don't own anything. We owe them nothing. They just believe that we do, and they're willing to enforce it by bribing other people to kill us. I have to smile. I have to. Because if this doesn't fucking enrage you, nothing will. Nothing will. You're already dead. This is the way it works, folks. So check out the compounding interest. Look at the table of what the beautiful people of the United States owe. And it's a worse calculation per capita for every other person everywhere else in the world, because the United States gets the best deal. And it's not a deal at all. This is the way it really is. This is the way it really works. And this is why they're doing it. You know, just a heads up. They're going to do a slow burn on everybody, because these people are frail and they're accessible to all of us at any time. People decide to shake it off and smell the coffee. Nice to see you again. Please have a nice day.